Pondering. Pondering is what I've been doing lately, viewers. You see, I had a crisis recently. I'm desperate to figure out the meaning of life, because I feel like mine has no meaning. But this led me down a bizarre path of thoughts. Initially, I believed it was to find some sort of spiritual and emotional fulfillment. Quickly, I realized that that's some moronic bullshit. So, I kept thinking, perhaps it's to reproduce, to keep the human race going. While I was closer to the answer, I was still a little bit off. So I kept thinking. And eventually, after a couple days of thinking, I came to the conclusion that life is about fucking. Nothing more, nothing less. And this conclusion was reached thanks to the film series, or film trilogy, the X Trilogy, which Maxine is actually was in theaters last week, and I got the privilege to see it in theaters, and it was a good experience. And I'd like to talk about this trilogy, because it's definitely an interesting and very, very well-known trilogy. But I feel like not enough people talk about it in the way that I hope to today. So, I won't fuck around. Let's just get to it. I'm Ghost, I'm your host, and this is the X Trilogy.
Wow!
I'm just going to quickly summarize the three movies, by the way, and then I'll get into, thoughts and my problems with them and whatnot. But first, I just want to get you an idea of what the movies are about. X is a 2022 slasher horror film directed by Ty West, who you might know from directing a portion of the film ABCs of Death. He did one of the letters. Put which letter up on screen, I don't remember which. Ty West has, at this point in time, by 2022, become relatively known to some horror fans, but in reality, the movie that made his name truly and properly recognizable both in and out of the horror scene was this film, X. It was the first film released of this trilogy, and it followed a group of people traveling to a remote farmhouse in Texas, where they were going to record a porno. Well, some weird old lady and old man, they're the ones that live in the farmhouse, and they're renting out the guest cabin to this crew. But, well, it doesn't seem as though they like them very much. And the old lady, she's horny as shit. Seriously, I mean, she needs some as fast as possible. But her husband will literally die if they fuck. Probably. Because of his bad heart, which is a real bummer. Also, a guy named RJ, the camera guy, he gets cucked by his girlfriend, who's Jenna Ortega. And, yeah, he dies in the same day, and that's a real bummer, but I feel the need to mention this. Anyways, so the old couple ends up killing the entire crew except for one actor, Maxine, who makes it out. Both old people are dead. Old guy, he has a heart attack, and our old lady, Pearl, she gets her head run over. Real bummer, huh? Well, don't worry, we're not done with Pearl, our little iconic old lady, because we get to see her in the film Pearl, which is the next film that's released of the trilogy, which also came out in 2022 and was directed by Ty West again. And Mia Goth, I will take a moment to appreciate her performance, because, dear God, she just pops off here. Damn. But Pearl follows Pearl, the old lady in X, in her youth. Her husband is overseas for the war, and she's living at home at the very same farmhouse in X with her father, who is totally incapable of doing anything, I think due to Spanish flu, fucking him up real bad, and her mother, who's a major bitch. Well, Pearl seems to have some slightly sadistic urges, killing animals and whatnot, and also her best friends are alligators, which is a little bizarre. Pearl essentially follows Pearl and her dreams to become a dancer, and her fighting the world, which really doesn't want her to be a dancer. Well, all she wants is freedom, and, well, I suppose she sort of achieves it, at least freedom from individuals whom she had issues with, including her mother, whom she burns alive, her father, whom she suffocates, if I recall correctly, and her little fling while her husband's overseas, a guy that runs films at the local theater, and her sister-in-law. And then we get to the most recent Maxine, which is the sequel to X. Maxine left theaters last week, I believe. I was actually at the last showing in my local area. And Maxine follows Maxine from X, the survivor, the final girl, as she has now made it in the world of porn and is attempting to evolve beyond that and become a proper Hollywood actor. And she gets a role. Unfortunately, someone doesn't like Maxine. And there's a mysterious killer going around. And it just so happens that some of her colleagues are the victims. Well, eventually, she gets a tape of the footage from X that they'd filmed prior to the entire crew besides her getting killed. And, well, this is a little bizarre. But she's essentially getting blackmailed into, meeting up with the guy that's doing this. Well, she doesn't want that. What the hell would she do that for? She's a strong, independent woman, and she isn't afraid of this fucker. And she shouldn't have been. It was her dad. I guess that it was her dad in the first 5 minutes of the movie. But it was, in fact, her dad who was the killer. And the reason she shouldn't have been afraid is because she kills that asshole like it was nothing. I mean, he kills a lot of people, including 2 cops that were helping out Maxine. But, hey, his head gets popped like a watermelon by a shotgun at the end of the film, and that's pretty exciting. Now that you've got an idea of all 3 of the films, I'd like to quickly kind of tell you my personal thoughts on all of them. Starting with X. X is my favorite of the trilogy by a noticeable amount. It functions not only as just a generally very solid slasher film, but it's a really great love letter to other classic, grimy, slimy horror films. The Grindhouse classic, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in particular, was the one that I got the most similar vibes from. So, X, I really quite liked. Each character felt fun and enjoyable and unique, and just generally, the movie had a level of polish that I enjoyed that didn't detract from the nastiness, and we had a good amount of on-screen viciousness. I appreciated that, because as you'll see, that becomes an issue. But the kills are all sufficiently brutal, I'd say. Each character is enjoyable enough, besides Jenna Ortega's, who is a good character, but a major bitch. And, just generally, I found X to be the best of the series. It's just overall really well-rounded, and I don't have all that much to say about it as a result. It's just a good movie, and I genuinely recommend that you check it out. Next up, however, we have my least favorite of the trilogy, which is Pearl. Which is funny, because it's actually the one with the highest rating on Letterboxd. But I'm going to call bullshit there. I'm going to talk about this in an entirely separate video at some point, not just about, but it does apply to Pearl, so I'd like to talk about it. Very briefly, at least. A lot of mainstream modern horror, the stuff that gets a lot of views in the box office, is perfectly ironed out and clean and pretty to look at and nice and flows so well and perfect to appeal to as many people as it possibly can. And quite simply, this goes against the point of horror. Horror is meant to challenge things. In your R-rated film, if you're too afraid to show a kill on screen, then you can just fuck off. Now, there are times where an off-screen kill or something makes sense. With Pearl, it never does. And the kills that are on screen are extremely mild. Pearl is a disappointment, because where X is a love letter to grindhouse classics, Pearl attempts to capture the feeling of the time that this film takes place, but unfortunately, fails. Not only is this film extremely clean and pretty looking, but just generally is extremely bland. We don't get to any of the interesting stuff until halfway in. I don't really give a shit about Pearl's character, because, to be quite honest, I'm not able to relate to them whatsoever, because I'm not a pretentious prick, but also, like, it's just generally, she's a fairly bland character. I liked her more as an old lady in X. I can't connect with the time period, or at least the way it's portrayed, because we barely see any of it. I understand that she wants her freedom and her individuality, but to be perfectly honest, I just don't give enough of a shit. There's nothing making me care about any character in this entire film. The dad doesn't say a single word because of how fucked up he is, which is fine. You know, I didn't expect anything from that, and he's actually somehow the best character. The mother's just generic, like, I'm looking out for you and this family. I just want what's best for the family. Bitch. You know, super generic. Pearl's just like, I want to be a dancer. Yeehaw. And I'm like, okay, go fuck yourself. And she humps a scarecrow, and that's the scariest scene of the movie. Just generally, Pearl has very little going for it. It's an over-streamlined, ironed-out, perfect, pretty little movie that goes against the very point of horror, which is to challenge things and to be ugly. And it has shitty characters. And now we get to Maxine, the most recent in the trilogy, the sequel to X. No Pearl to be seen, just Maxine, you know, being a girl boss, right? Maxine's the worst of the trilogy from a purely technical standpoint. The movie is extremely predictable, lacks originality. Its feeling of the 80s is accomplished, but also falls into a lot of weird 80s movie, or not 80s movie, but stereotypes when it comes to trying to capture the feel of the 80s, that I feel like fail to capture the feel of the 80s. You know, just generally, I feel as though there's the most issues with this film. But at least it's fun. You know what? Pearl I found to be mind-rottingly boring, but Maxine was a goddamn fun time. I can't sit here and tell you it's good, because it's not. But seeing Maxine up in Hollywood, you know, seeing all the satanic panic shit where they're like, you know, horror movies are evil and all that. You know, having her dad try and kill her, or exorcise her, kill her. And on top of all this, besides the director, who's kind of just generic, pretentious director character, Maxine's cast is all just really fun. All the characters are enjoyable and memorable. Pearl's are memorably bland. Now, I just wanted to be able to talk about my opinion before I got into this, but I would like to read you the top review of each three of these films. That's an actual review and not just a quip. Just to, you know, let you hear other opinions, because obviously me hating on Pearl is unpopular. Me loving X isn't particularly unpopular, and my feelings toward Maxine are complicated. So I'd like to read you a few nice reviews from other individuals. Alright, this is the top proper review that I found. Nice to see Jenna oh, and this is by David Lewis, by the way. And it's a 4.5-star review. Nice to see Jenna Ortega doing the elevated horror she loves. Okay, real review. First things first, there is a stinger at the end, so stay through the credits. A lovely little throwback to classic slasher films of the early 80s. A sun-soaked slice of practical effected, sleazy, and exploitatively shot and infused with tension and menace. We have likable victims with the pornographers, and you are sad when they die. The old people are actually believable threats, and their motivations for their crimes almost gives them a degree of sympathy, before you remember they are killing people. Envy is usually a very petty reason for crimes, but age comes for us all. Dreams fail to pan out, and we will all become like them eventually. Condemn their actions, but also they are understandable. Kinda. But hey, on the bright side, we have high-quality practical effects for all the kills. And they are brutal. The first half is pretty much gore-free, but once the lights go red, it gets wild. But the real thing about this film that might actually make it elevated horror is that in the end, it is about the pain of missed opportunities and life not giving you what you want, no matter how hard you've worked for it. And you can deal with it productively, playing the cards you were dealt the best you can, or you can stew on it for 60 years and go on a killing spree. Next on to Pearl. This is by Cinema Joe, and it's a 3.5-star review. Pearl's not a horror movie in the same way X is a horror movie, but it's also why it works as the perfect companion to X. It opts completely out of the slasher genre, substituting the blood and sex-infused depravity of X. There's still some interesting moments of Pearl, with a full-blown character study of Pearl. Well, this will certainly be a disappointment for those looking for kills and thrills. Hi, that's me. Mia Goth makes up for it by simply being Mia Goth. Dragged a little too much for my liking, but the last 30 minutes is Mia Goth proving she's a fucking superstar. And finally we have Maxine. This is a 2.5-star, once again by Cinema Joe. Hi there, Cinema Joe. Love how West reanimates the scuzzy streets of 80s LA. Love the multiple instances of goopy practical effects. Love Mia Goth, even if Maxine Minx is the least compelling character she's played in the trilogy. But all of these are cosmetics masking a movie with a severe identity crisis, and one that completely flounders in the third act. Puddle deep thematically, characters lack dimension, there's no sense of cohesion, a baffling conclusion to what was a promising trilogy. The X trilogy is one of the most popular horror trilogies to hit the scene in recent years, and it's kind of a bizarre thought that all three have come out in the 2020s. You know, I mean, it's just a really bizarre thought because of how monumental they are. All three of them are instant classics, regardless of the technical quality of them. And I do appreciate what Ty West has brought to the scene. While I definitely have my problems with Pearl and Maxine, all three of these films are home to unique identities and interesting stories. So for that, I applaud the X trilogy. But like I said, check it out if you haven't already. It's an interesting trilogy, and you're certainly going to be left out of a lot of discussions if you're trying to get into the horror scene as of right now. And thank you for watching my video. Thank you for making it this far. It was a little messy, but I hope you had fun. I sure did. And, well, I hope to see you all in the future. Thank you again, and have a good one.